Buongiorno a tutti. Welcome everyone to this second day of our settimana della cucina italiana nel mondo. After yesterday's conversation with Professor Gentilcore, today we are very happy to host Professor Massimo Montanari from the University of Bologna, who will introduce us to an exciting topic, and also he will present his new book that actually the translation in English of his book Il mito delle origini, that since yesterday is is available in the US under the title A Short History of Spaghetti with Tomato Sauce. And therefore I would like to warmly thank Professor Massimo Montanari for being with us today and for having accepted so kindly our invitation. I'm also very happy to renew our cooperation with Casa Artusi, and therefore I would like to welcome President of Casa Artusi, Mrs. Laila Tentoni. And of course, always I'm very happy to partner once again with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you, Professor Menechella. I also would like to thank Professor Patrick Rambo for his support today, also from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And as well, I'm extremely glad to welcome the students of the University of Wisconsin-Madison who are following our webinar today. Finally, I would like to welcome as well and thank Consul General of Italy in Chicago, Thomas Bozios, to whom I will soon leave the floor for his welcoming remarks. I would like just to welcome you as usual that our webinar is being recorded and it will soon be available on our YouTube channel. And finally, I invite you to contribute and interact with us by typing your question using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Please, Consul General, I leave you the floor.
Thank you, Director Di Vito. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your participation in this webinar. Let me also thank Dottoressa Laila Tentoni, from President of Casa Artusi from Forlì Popoli, Professor Menechella from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a special thanks goes to Professor Montanari. We are eager to listen to his lecture, but I'm going to leave him the floor soon. Allow me just some brief remarks to remind that this webinar is organized in the frame of the 6th edition of the Settimana della Cucina Italiana nel Mondo, the Week of the Italian Cuisine in the World 2021 edition, which will run from the 15th on the 21st of November as part of the worldwide initiative launched 5 years ago and promoted by the network of Italian embassies, consulates general, and Italian cultural institutes all around the world. Here in the United States, under the coordination of our embassy in Washington, D.C., the Italian network of consular offices and cultural institutes and trade agencies, we will organize a total of 40 events focused on tradition, innovation, and creativity and sustainability of the Italian cuisine. Today, talking about the history of one of the iconic Italian dishes, the spaghetti al pomodoro, so spaghetti with tomato sauce, we are somehow making the second leg of a round trip we started yesterday. After having heard about the introduction of the tomato plant, like corn and potatoes, among others, in Italy, now we will focus on how the Italian cuisine influenced the America, and let me say the entire world, through the processing of tomato and other food. I would like to outline now, among many others, how cuisine and food processing have played a very important role in creating, in a circular way, interconnection between Italy and America. Once again, allow me to say, once again, we can say that approaching different cultures with respect and open mind can facilitate mutual enrichment. So on my behalf, that's it. And I thank you again. I leave the floor again to Director Di Vito. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul. I would like now to leave the floor to Mrs. Laila Tentoni, President of Casa Artusi, but I will also who will introduce us briefly to the activities of Casa Artusi. And I would like also to remind you that Casa Artusi has curated a wonderful exhibition on the same topic that we are talking about today. So it's an exhibition that merges Professor Montanari studies on the history of spaghetti with tomato sauce with very interesting watercolor works that depict this interesting history. Please, President Tentoni, the floor is yours. Prego.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti. Io sono davvero molto felice che anche questa edizione della settimana della cucina italiana nel mondo, la sesta, dedicata per l'appunto a tradizioni e prospettive della cucina italiana, si apra con Chicago. Quindi grazie al direttore dell'Istituto Italiano di Cultura, il dottor Luca Di Vito, e naturalmente grazie alla professoressa Grazia Menechella, a cui ci leggo un affetto e una collaborazione che dura da anni, in nome del nostro caro e vecchio Artusi, che ha ancora molte cose da insegnarci. Saluto tutti i presenti e naturalmente saluto e ringrazio il console generale Thomas Bozios, che anche l'anno scorso, ricordo, appena arrivato, fu presente al nostro incontro e quindi ancora oggi ci onora della sua presenza. Per me essere qui anche per un piccolo saluto come presidente di Casa Artusi, la fondazione che si aspetti il compito di promuovere la cultura gastronomica italiana nel mondo in nome di quello che noi riteniamo il migliore interprete possibile, Pellegrino Artusi, è sicuramente fonte di grande soddisfazione.
Now I will translate what President Tentoni has begun to say. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased that this 6th edition of the Week of Italian Cuisine in the World, dedicated to tradition and innovation in the Italian kitchen, awareness and commitment to food sustainability, opens in Chicago. I would like to thank, therefore, the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Chicago, Dr. Luca Di Vito, and I would also naturally like to thank Professor Grazia Menechella, with whom we share bonds not only of affection, but also collaboration that has lasted many years in the name of Pellegrino Artusi, who still has so many things to teach us. I offer my greetings to all of you here today, as well as to the Consul General of Italy, Thomas Bozios, who, just after he transferred to Chicago, was present at our event last year. And this year, he again honors us with his presence. For me, it gives me great satisfaction to be here, if only for a brief greeting, as president of the Casa Artusi Foundation, dedicated to the promotion of Italian gastronomical culture in the world, in the name of the person we consider its best interpreter, Pellegrino Artusi.
Se l'anno scorso il tema della settimana della cucina era proprio legato a Pellegrino Artusi in occasione del bicentenario della nascita e quindi proprio per questo fu celebrato e ricordato in tutto il mondo, quest'anno, come diceva il direttore dell'Istituto, la proposta di Casa Artusi, che è inserita proprio nel toolkit del Maeci della Farnesina, è la mostra La storia illustrata degli spaghetti al pomodoro, curata dal collezionista libraio milanese Andrea Tomasetti in collaborazione con Casa Artusi, con 18 acquerelli, di cui ne state vedendo qualcuno, dell'artista milanese Luciano Ragozzino e con i testi per l'appunto del professor Massimo Montanari, riferimento al libro di cui ci parlerà questa sera. Testi perfetti e immagini belle portano a un risultato straordinario. Devo dire una mostra di grande efficacia che sarà disponibile, finita la settimana, in versione web per tutti coloro che la vorranno conoscere.
If last year the theme of the week was linked to Pellegrino Artusi, on the occasion of the bicentenary of his birth, and for this reason he was celebrated throughout the world, This year, instead, the initiative proposed by Casa Artusi, integrated within the Toolkit initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have organized an exhibition entitled The Illustrated History of Spaghetti with Tomato Sauce, curated by the Milanese book collector Andrea Tomasetig in collaboration with Casa Artusi, with 18 watercolor paintings by the artist Luciano Ragozzino and an essay by Professor Massimo Montanari, who in fact will be speaking with us here today. In the exhibition, precious captions and beautiful images offer extraordinary results, an exhibition of great effectiveness that will be accessible to everyone online at the end of the Week of Italian Cuisine in the World.
Le immagini che ho scelto di anticipare, che vedete soprattutto adesso, anche in questo preciso istante, sono state scelte naturalmente in riferimento ad Artusi, per sottolineare l'importanza che egli stesso diede alla pasta, anticipando proprio tendenze che si sarebbero affermate poi successivamente nel corso del Novecento. Il pomodoro, in questo caso il pomodoro rappresentato proprio come la racconta Artusi, con l'aneddoto del prete di Romagna, questo è un prete, che si faceva gli affari degli altri, quindi chiamato Don Pomodoro, a testimonianza che il pomodoro va su tutto. E naturalmente l'importanza alla lingua, e abbiamo rappresentato Artusi assieme a Dante, con 2 pannelli aggiuntivi alla mostra. I testi sono stati scritti dalla professoressa Giovanna Frosini e dalla ricercatrice Monica Alba, perché è proprio sotto il segno di Dante che Artusi muove i primi passi verso quel fiorentino vivo e colloquiale che renderà la scienza, e cito le autrici, un libro rivoluzionario.
The images that I am sharing here are the ones related to the following 3 themes. Pellegrino Artusi, in order to stress the importance he gave to pasta, thus anticipating culinary trends of the 20th century. 2, the tomato, represented as narrated by Artusi in the anecdote of the priest of Romagna, getting into other people's business, and for this reason nicknamed Don Pomodoro. 3, the theme of language, and for this reason, Artusi is represented with Dante in 2 additional panels with text by Giovanna Frosini and Monica Alba, reflecting how Dante influenced Artusi's use of Florentine Italian, so lively and colloquial, that made Artusi's Science in the Kitchen a revolutionary book.
Un'altra iniziativa di grande rilievo di cui non posso non parlarvi è la messa online da qualche giorno, dal 12 novembre, di tutto il carteggio artusiano. Si tratta di oltre 1900 lettere in arrivo ad Artusi da tutta l'Italia, da donne e uomini di ogni censo, marchese, contesse, massaie, casalinghe, che richiedono il manuale inviando consigli e ricette. Uno scambio epistolare continuo che, come sappiamo, ebbe un peso non trascurabile nel successo della scienza e che ci consegna oggi uno spaccato straordinario non solo di Artusi, ma soprattutto della vita quotidiana al tempo di Artusi nel mondo borghese di fine Ottocento e non solo, e fino ai primi del Novecento. Tutto il carteggio è stato digitalizzato e trascritto. Un lavoro durato direi qualche anno e dal 12 novembre è a disposizione di curiosi, appassionati, studenti, ricercatori sul sito di Casa Artusi.
Yet another initiative of great importance that I must tell you about is the online publication, beginning on November 12th, of the entirety of Pellegrino Artusi's letters and correspondence. This includes over 1,900 letters received by Artusi from all over Italy, from women and men of all backgrounds, including aristocrats, workers, housewives, and others who requested his book, while sometimes sending suggestions and recipes. It was a continuous epistolary exchange over many years, that we know had a huge impact on the success of Artusi's cookbook. These letters offer extraordinary insights, not only into the life of Artusi, but also into normal life between the 19th and 20th centuries. All of the correspondence has been digitized and transcribed, a work that took years to complete. And starting on November 12th, it will be available online on the Casa Artusi website to all of those who are interested.
Non mi resta che salutare, perché naturalmente sono anch'io qui per ascoltare il professor Montanari, massimo esperto italiano di storia dell'alimentazione e anche presidente del comitato scientifico di Casa Artusi, che sempre ringrazio anche per il suo lavoro nel centro culturale che opera a Forlimpopoli, città natale di Artusi. Oggi Massimo torna a Chicago per l'appunto dopo 4 anni, purtroppo questa volta in remoto e senza Marietta, per parlarci, direi, di un piccolo capolavoro, però a questo oramai ci ha abituato.
I am also here to greet and listen to a lecture by Professor Massimo Montanari, the leading Italian expert in the history of food and also the president of the scientific committee of the Casa Artusi. As always, I also thank Massimo for his contributions to the cultural center he runs in Forlimpopoli, Artusi's birthplace. Today, Massimo returns to Chicago, 4 years since his last visit, unfortunately this time in virtual form and without the presence of Marietta, to speak to us about his book, which is a little masterpiece, but we're accustomed to such masterpieces from him.
Ringrazio nuovamente tutti i presenti. Grazie Patrick, invio un augurio da Casa Artusi nella speranza che i tempi prossimi siano più sereni di quelli che abbiamo vissuto fino adesso e finisco riconoscendo che questo inizio della settimana della cucina con voi, speriamo l'anno prossimo in presenza, mi piace moltissimo perché consolida un lavoro che continua con profitto nel tempo, tanto da sperare che diventi tradizione. E noi, si sa, alla tradizione per guardare avanti, per guardare al futuro, siamo sempre molto, molto attenti. Grazie mille, grazie.
Finally, I would like to thank once again all of you who are here with us today, and I send best wishes from Casa Artusi in the hope that the future may be more serene and that what we have experienced in the hope that the future may be more serene than what we have experienced up to now. And I conclude by recognizing that this opening of the Week of Italian Cuisine in the World gives me great pleasure because it consolidates work that continues constructively across time, allowing us to hope that it might become a tradition. And as we know, in order to see forward, in order to look into the future, we are always very, very attentive to tradition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Antoni, for this interesting introduction. And thank you, Professor Rambo, for your precious help and support. I will now leave the floor to Professor Menechella and Professor Massimo Montanari for a short history of spaghetti with tomato sauce. Thank you.
Thank you. 4 years ago, on the occasion of the second annual Week of the Italian Cuisine in the World, Massimo Montanari was on campus at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for a lecture entitled Eating Italy, History of Italian Food and Identity. He also introduced the pasta demonstration by Marietta Barbarazioli in collaboration with chef Francesco Mangano, held here on campus for our students. 4 years later, we come back to some of these keywords and themes: Italian food, identity, and pasta. Yes, to celebrate Italian cuisine. Yes, to celebrate the publication of Montanari's A Short History of Spaghetti with Tomato Sauce in English, but mostly to hear Montanari deconstruct spaghetti al pomodoro, the most iconic Italian dish today in Italy and abroad, as he does in his book. How fortunate we are to have Montanari with us during the Week of Italian Cuisine in the World to present a book that came out yesterday in the US. I picked up my hardcover copy at a local bookstore in Madison, Wisconsin yesterday, The book is now available in bookstores and from online sources, and also in other formats such as ebook and audiobook, but the hardcover edition is very, very nice. The English edition has a colorful cover in which we see the strong contrast of red and green, and the image of a big full plate of pasta with tomato sauce and basil on top. The book will reveal what is behind that image. You will learn that historically that plate was not full, that the tomato sauce was not on top of spaghetti, that there was no basil in sight, and so much more. The Italian edition was published by La Terza in 2019 with the title Il mito delle origini and with the subtitle Breve storia degli spaghetti al pomodoro. That subtitle has become the title of the English edition. The myth of the origins might not appear on the cover, but you will discover in the first chapter what Montanari means by the myth of the origins. We might purchase the book thinking of an entertaining history of spaghetti al pomodoro, to discover with pleasure, with great pleasure, that not only we are learning about a very complex history of all the ingredients that today are part of this dish and other related matters, cooking times, tools to eat it as a side dish or as a full plate, but that we should reflect on the meaning of origins, roots, and identity in general, and also in this specific case. Montanari poses this question in his introductory chapter, quote, "Is it possible to sit down with a plate of spaghetti with tomato sauce and reflect on the meaning of roots, identities, and origins?" End of quote. Well, we are about to find out. I would like to thank Thomas Bozios, Consul General of Italy in Chicago, Luca Di Vito, Director of the Italian Cultural Institute of Chicago, Elizabeth Covington, and everyone at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Center for European Studies, the Department of French and Italian, UW librarians Lisa Wetkerson and Karen Dunn, and last but not least, Laida Tentoni, President of Casa Artusi. Thank you all for attending today, and of course, a special thank you to our guest speaker, Massimo Montanari. Now, a few words about our speaker. Food historian Massimo Montanari is a professor of medieval history and food history at the University of Bologna. He has held seminars and lectures all over the world. He's the founder of the MA program, Food History and Culture at the University of Bologna. He also serves as the president of the Comitato Scientifico of Casa Artusi. He regularly teaches courses on the history of food at the University of Bologna, and many of our University of Wisconsin students have and will study with Montanari while studying abroad in Bologna. Among his many publications, I will mention titles available in English: The Culture of Food, A Culinary History, edited with Flandrin; Italian Cuisine, A Cultural History, written with Alberto Capatti; Food is Culture, Cheese, Pears, and History in a Proverb; Let the Meatballs Rest, A Cultural History of Food in the Medieval Age; Italian Identity in Cooking, and Tastes of the Middle Ages, Food, Cooking, and the Table. I do have, I don't think I have the screen, but if you can see it, here the twin books, the yellow and the green one, very colorful. Massimo, we are so pleased to have you here. We are ready for your history of spaghetti with tomato sauce. Thank you.
Thank you, Grazia. Thank you, Professor Menechella. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to the Istituto Italiano di Cultura. I'm so happy to be here. And you said, and I repeat, that it's a pity not to be there and in presence, but the technological means allow us to be very close, even if we are very far. So I feel with you now, and thank you very much. And I would like to open a little PowerPoint. If okay, this is the end. Let's go to the beginning of the story. Okay. So, here. Spaghetti with tomato sauce, the story of an identity dish, as you said. You have already understood that what I make in this book is to trace the story of an identity dish, an iconic dish of Italian cuisine. About a book, about the book I have written. Writing this book, I had a twofold purpose. First one, telling an interesting and I hope amusing story. More generally, as Professor Menechella said, reflecting on words such as origins, roots, identity, we often use when talking about food and recipes. My question is, what do they really mean? How we can use them? So the historical deconstruction of the dish is made on two perspectives, on two parallel perspectives: the ingredients of the dish and the procedures for making this dish. The ingredients I have chosen are very simple. Spaghetti, of course. Tomato sauce, of course. Olive oil. Garlic. Onion. Basilic. Chili pepper, if you like it. And at the end, Parmigiano cheese grated on the top. This story begins with pasta, of course, and we have a prehistory of pasta coming from the Middle East to the Mediterranean. Pasta is a very, very old thing, a very, very old object. It was presented by ancient literature as a variant, a sort of variant of bread called Asiatic bread, very thin and without yeast, perhaps Egyptian, perhaps Mesopotamian, but we must arrive to the Persian culture, the Persian language that I don't know, has two words, Raksha and Rishta, that seem to be the first mentions of two essential characteristics of our spaghetti: long-sized pasta, cut in strips or strings, and dried pasta. This is very important in our story. In the meanwhile, even in the Greek world and in the Roman world, appear terms as such as laganon in Greek, lagana in Roman, terms that are still alive in Italian language. Lasagna comes from there. And this is a very different kind of pasta, large, fresh, and mainly to think about that this kind of pasta in the Greek-Roman world is not a culinary category, a culinary genere, because this pasta is just an ingredient to be used inside other dishes. We have only a few recipe books from Roman times, but never we find here inside these books a dish of pasta. Pasta is known, but there is not a cooking based on this category. The dried and long-shaped pasta that we have found in the Persian tradition, in the Persian culture, come to the Arab world when the Arabs conquer the Persian Empire. And they assume all Persian culture, including culinary culture. And in the medieval Arab language appear this term, this word, Itria, also present in Greek as tria, that means exactly long, dried pasta, what we will call, passing the time, spaghetti. Now we go to Sicily. Sicily is a crucial region for our story because Sicily is an area of encounters. I insist on this subject of encounters that make this story. Sicily was the granary of the Roman Empire, was the place where durum wheat was cultivated. And here, in this region, in Sicily, arrives the Greek-Roman tradition of the fresh pasta, large and fresh pasta, and the Arab imprint, the new Arab imprint that gives to Sicily, since the 9th century, the Arabs stay in Sicily from the 9th to the 11th centuries. And with the Arabs, this Eastern tradition of dry and long-shaped pasta arrives in Europe, arrives in the Mediterranean, arrives in Italy, arrives in Sicily. Sicily remains, even in the following centuries, a sort of melting pot of cultures. In the 12th century, when Sicily is no more of Arab domination, but ruled by the Normans, we have Latins, Greeks, Arabs, Jews working at the court of the kings. So it's the place for excellence of cultural contamination. So it is not a surprise to find here in Sicily the first known mention of pasta in the sense we give it now to this term. Al-Idrizi was a geographer and traveler of Maghrebi origin, collaborator of the Norman king Roger II, and author of a book entitled Pleasant Journeys into Faraway Lands. Inside this book, we find this very interesting note. At Trabia, is a village in the vicinity of Palermo, still existing today, he notes the presence of perennial waters that move several mills and of vast farms where a lot of pasta is made for export to all Calabria and other Islamic and Christian countries, and many shiploads of it are exported. The name for pasta is the Arab name, Italy. Calabria means all southern Italy, but you see that in this passage, the whole production chain is evoked. The production of wheat, the transformation of wheat, the mills, and the making of pasta, Itria, and the commercialization of pasta, shiploads, the sea. In this century, the 12th, and the following, the 13th, industrial and commercial vocation of pasta is spreading. Sicily, first, Sardinia, Genoa, Pisa, perhaps Amalfi, Venice are documented as the places for a rich market of pasta. Why Venice? Because the Venetians buy pasta in Puglia and then sell it in the north. This is a very important thing to be noted, because still today, industrial pasta, I mean pasta made dried for commercialization, is an Italian typicality all over the world. And this is something that appeared already in the Middle Ages. The Sicilians in this and the following centuries are known as mangia macaroni, macaroni eaters. And we find this curious name even in a 17th century comedy where a Neapolitan gentleman calls mangia macaroni a Sicilian, just to mock him. I put this mark because later on, just this mark, macaroni eater, mangia macaroni, will pass to the Neapolitans themselves. Then later on to the Italians as a whole, but we will go to that. We will get just an observation on the words. Macaroni means pasta as a whole. Is the Itria, the Arab Itria. Or in sometimes macaroni means specifically spaghetti. And this is true until the 19th century. Still now, if you go to the south of Italy, if you go to Naples, the word spaghetti is not used. They call macaroni what in the world is called spaghetti. The first Italian cookery books appear in the 14th century. The first one comes from Naples, from the Angevin royal court, but probably this text is based on a previous Sicilian cookbook written in the 13th century at the Suevian court of Friedrich II, Palermo. We are always there. In this book, we find a recipe that is called Vermiculi sive ancia alexandrina. It's a very particular and curious expression. Vermiculi means little worms, the shape of spaghetti. Sive ancia, the linguists think that is a word coming from the Latin anguis, that means snake. And Alexandria is a sort of evocation of the Eastern world where the pasta culture is coming from. Another manuscript of the same book uses different words, tria, pasta, vermiculos, worms, and tria is a name and recipes that we find in other books, in other cookery books, Italian cookery books of the 14th and the 15th century. We arrive in this way to Maestro Matino. Maestro Matino is the most famous cook of this last century of the Middle Ages. We are in the mid of the 15th century. The name of his book is Libro de Arte Coquinaria. Libro is Italian, De Arte Coquinaria is Latin, but the book is written in Italian. Here we find the first recipe described of making macaroni siciliani, macaroni from Sicily. It's not a chance, I mean. Sicily is always a point of reference. These macaroni are long, thin, and Martino recommends to perforate them with a wire. All is made by hand in this time. Wire thin as a spago, as a string. This is the first time we find a word that evocates in a way the word spaghetti, but not for telling the shape of the pasta, but for describing what is used for giving the shape to the pasta, to these macaroni. These are long and dried. They should be dried at the heat of the sun, writes Martino, so as to last 2 or 3 years. Then we have another recipe macaroni alla genovese, Genoa style. They have to be cut not larger than a spago. So these are the first testimonies of this word in a gastronomic field. In the Middle Ages, Martino and other books, pasta is becoming a category of food. It is no more a simple ingredient as it was in Greek, Roman cuisine, but it is an actual category of food. As we see in cookery books, Maestro Matino groups together lasagne, vermicelli, macaroni, and in dietary books. Also physicians, also people writing on dietetics use this kind of words. Tri is the tria, or ferculis de pasta in Latin mean dishes of pasta that appear in two dietetic books of the 14th, 15th centuries. We will go back to these dietary books in a moment. Because boiling in water or in broth, boiling in a liquid, is a practice that we find obvious today, but nothing is obvious in history. And this procedure is linked to the basic principle of ancient and medieval dietetics that we can resume in this motto: opposites cure opposites, contraria contrariis sanantur. What does it mean? It means that we have in foods, but not only in foods, in everything that exists in nature, four essential qualities: cold, hot, dry, and moist. And the purpose of a cook must be temperate, harmonize. What is cold must be tempered with hot. What is dry must be tempered with moist. Then, boiling pasta in a liquid is a way to give back humidity to a dried product. You cannot eat pasta as it is. Roman pasta, Roman lagana, that was fresh pasta, was not cooked in water, but directly in an oven. We arrived to another topic strictly linked to the dietetic reflection. Benedetto Reguardati from Norcia, one of the physicians I have already quoted, in the chapter on cheese, De Caseo, writes that for food viscous, viscous means humid, sleepy, humor, if a food has a viscous humor, cheese is most suitable, and it properly can be eaten with macaroni, lasagna, and other pasta dishes. This is a physician that writes on pasta and suggests to eat cheese with pasta. This is one of the reasons, not the only one, because there is also a reason of taste, something to be affirmed in a culinary tradition must be good, not only salutare. How do you say salutare? Since the same centuries, the 12th and the 13th, that see the success of pasta, the spreading of pasta in Italian culinary model, sees an exact parallel success of Parmigiano. That is a new kind of cheese made with milk cheese. Elsewhere, there is the more traditional pecorino made with sheep's milk. So the conjunction of pasta with cheese is something that finds also an economic solution in the fields where milk cheese is produced. I have quoted here a famous novella of Giovanni Boccaccio from the Decameron, where we find the first description of Cocaine Mountain. Cocaine is the land of happiness, of abundant food, named by Boccaccio Bengodi. Later on, it will be named Cocaine, Coccagna. And what do you see in this land, in this magic land? You see, when you arrive, a big mountain of cheese on whose slopes always roll macaroni and ravioli, continuously cooked in a big cauldron on the top. This is a sort of imagination, of popular imagination of something that gives concretezza. Aiutatemi. Grazie, mi devi aiutare quando vi mancano le parole.
Concreteness.
Concreteness, grazie. Concreteness to this idea of eating pasta with cheese, or better, cheese with pasta in the perspective of this physician. Pasta with cheese in the perspective of Boccaccio. What is the relationship between pasta and the fork? The relationship is very simple. Traditional eating in the Middle Ages was made with a spoon for liquids and with hands for solids. But pasta is difficult to eat. It's difficult to handle with hands because it's eaten hot and it is slippery. So it is not a chance that we find in late medieval documents a strict relationship between the testimonial of the use of forks and the use of pasta. So it's a story that become to be very complicated, very, very, very large. In the 17th century, now we go to Naples. We move from Sicily, we go to Naples. There is a turning point in the history of pasta. Well explained by Emilio Sereni in a fundamental essay on this topic, I Napoletani, the Neapolitans, that were called mangiafoglie, cabbage eaters, mangia macaroni, macaroni eaters. What is happening in Naples is a food crisis, a general food crisis linked to political and economic difficulties in the first decades of the 17th century. Traditional resources, and mainly cabbages and meat, are lacking. In the meanwhile, there is a sort of industrial revolution, or reform, if you want, better reform. The two key machines of the pasta industry that are attested since the previous century are introduced in Naples in a systematic way. These machines are the mechanical duff knead and the press that give a shape to pasta. The combination, the system of these two machines is called by the Neapolitans still today ingegno. That is a formidable word, because ingegno means the thing and means the thinking, the idea to make the thing. The introduction of this machine in the industry of pasta means that pasta price on the market low, si abbassa. So pasta, always associated with cheese, becomes for this popular public the new staple food, and most people use this new staple food. This is important to note. I call it a turning point, because this is the first time that the pasta is not a dish included in the gastronomic system as it was in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance, but becomes the dish, the principal dish, the staple food for most popular inhabitants of Naples and then other regions of the south in Italy. Linked into this, we find a new taste, the taste of cooking al dente. Al dente is an expression that cannot be translated outside of Italian. In English, al dente is said al dente. That means the appreciation of a texture of pasta, of a consistency of pasta harder than before. Before, pasta was often overcooked, scotted, as we say today. This was linked to the use of pasta as a side dish. This was true mainly for the upper classes, but even in the lower classes, if pasta was used with other food stuff, was overcooked because it was a side dish. Starting from the 17th and the 18th century, mainly in Naples, a new taste of pasta appears. We find it in this book of Ippolito Cavalcanti, 1839, in the appendix on popular cuisine that he adds to his cookery book, where he writes that make sure that the macaroni cook very firm, very hard, and when you think they are cooked, take away off the fire pasta and toss in a mug of cold water to stop cooking. This typical Neapolitan practice is reported by Pellegrino Artusi. We are at the end of the 19th century, that talking about macaroni, writes, as for the macaroni, the Neapolitans recommend they should not be cooked too long. So you see that spreading pasta and changing the way of eating pasta brings also a changing of taste. And this becomes what we call today the Italian taste. Outside of Italy, when pasta remains a side dish, and this happens in France, in Germany, in England, wherever you want, pasta remains overcooked. Finally, the tomato Tomato, as you know, you heard David Gentilcore yesterday, if I have well understood. So you know that the tomato come from America to Europe in the 16th century through Spain. It arrives in Italy, but there is a long distrust about the tomato, and it is absent, practically absent from cookery books until the end of the 17th century. Only very late, tomato finally gets to find a place in the system, in the Italian gastronomic system. That is a system, what we call a gastronomy, a culinary culture, is not simply adding things, but giving everything a place in a system. So what is the place that tomato finds? Is the form of a sauce. A sauce, because the sauces were a traditional ancient presence over all dishes. I call it a must of medieval Renaissance cuisine. So having a new sauce of a different color could be nice, could be added to everyone. But sauces, since the Middle Ages, were used mainly for seasoning, for dressing meats. And this Spanish sauce was used mainly for meat. Why Spanish sauce? This is an expression that we find in a cookbook entitled Lo Scalco alla Moderna by Antonio Latini. He was a typical exponent of what I call a Spanish Italy, Naples cuisine, Naples food culture, and the South. And we are at the very end of the 17th century. And here in this book, we find the first Italian recipe of tomato sauce. Salsa di pomodoro alla spagnola, Spanish style, seasoned with onions, chili pepper. This is an association that will last. Oil, vinegar, and writes Latini, it will be a very tasty sauce for boiled meat or other dishes. This is the first use of this sauce. That a sauce that with passing the time encounters more possibilities. For example, Vincenzo Corrado, in a cookbook, we are already at the end of the 18th century, called tomato sauce an universal sauce. This recalls a little bit what will write Artusi a century later. This sauce can be employed in infinite toppings, being suitable to meats, fish, eggs, herbs. What we find new is pasta. It's a new possibility. We are arriving. We are getting to our dish. Naples, 1807. Home cooking, cucina casereccia. I macaroni alla napoletana, Naples style, should be dressed, more than dressed, loaded, caricati, a splendid expression, caricati, with cheeses, aged cheeses, grated caciocavallo, and more cheeses if you have. Then they can be enriched with a good gravy in which the tomatoes, when they are in season, or tomato paste, have already been cooked. Two notes. The first one about this gravy, this sauce with meat that today we call ragu, using the name, a French name for a meat dish for indicating the dressing of pasta. Ragu sauce with meat is becoming a new possibility, but after the traditional dressing, seasoning pasta with cheese is always the first thing to do. Macaroni loaded with cheese, then possibly enriched with a good gravy with tomatoes. Second note, tomato paste. That means that begins the preservation of tomatoes that can be used not only on season, but also preserved. This can be made on a on a house, on a home level, domestically, but this is something that that goes towards the tomato industry that will be in the 19th century another Italian typicality. This dressing for pasta is evidently a popular dressing. Ippolito Cavalcanti, the same cook we have encountered, we have met a few slides ago, in his Cucina Teorico-Pratica, it's a book of Neapolitan cuisine, 1837, has no mention of tomato sauce. Only in the second edition, 2 years later, an edition enriched with an appendix on Cucina Casareccia in dialetto napoletano, that is cooking and speaking in dialect. Only here we find a recipe for the salsa de pomodoro, tomato sauce. Then he poses a question: which fat we must choose for flavoring the sauce? This is the question, and the answer is it depends on what the sauce will be used for. If you use the sauce for meats, fish, or eggs, a little butter will be good. If you use it for pasta, better to add insomnia, lard. You see that in this pasta story, we have found cheese and we have found lard as a popular alternative to butter. We have not yet met olive oil. Pellegrino Artusi, 1891, recipe 125. Tomato sauce seasoned with onion, garlic, celery, basil, parsley, olive oil, salt, and pepper will lend itself to innumerable uses. It will be good for boiled meat, and this is classic pairing. We have already met it in the cookbook by Antonio Latini, but above all, excellent to refine pasta dressed with cheese and butter. Even in the book of Artusi, cheese still remains the main dressing. Our use today, in a sense, has reversed the relationship between the two ingredients. We dress pasta with tomato sauce, and then at the end, we add cheese, grated cheese. Until 100 years ago, the use was the reverse. Dressing with cheese, then topping with tomato sauce. In these lines of Pellegrino Artusi, you will note that basil and olive oil, two ingredients we have listed at the beginning, appear for the first time. Mangia Macaroni, the appellation of Sicilians, we have seen from the 14th to the 16th century, and to the Neapolitans from the 17th to the 18th century. At this point, at the end of the 19th century, become an Italian appellation. Italians are known since now as Mangia Macaroni for two reasons, one internal and one external. The internal reason is that Artusi makes this extraordinary work for sharing all over the country every local tradition, including this southern use of pasta. The external factor is the emigration of many Italians that go to France, to Belgium, to Germany, to the United States, and mostly of them are from the south of Italy, and they are recognized as pasta eaters, Mangia Macaroni, Italians, Mangia Macaroni. A brief summary of the ingredients we have not yet considered. Chili pepper, it comes after the tomato. You have seen that in many recipes of tomato sauce, we have found the chili pepper. Garlic and onion, they arrive after the tomato sauce. Artusi wants them together. You can choose garlic or onion or together as you want, but it's the tomato sauce that takes with it these ingredients, as it makes with the chili pepper. And the basilic also comes after the tomato sauce, first time in Artusi. And the olive oil, the last one to arrive after the tomato sauce, because until when pasta was seasoned with cheese, butter, and lard were preferred to the oil. So olive oil is a very, very ancient product, but on pasta, its use spreads only in the second half of the 20th century, when the Mediterranean diet is invented by, as you know, an American physician, Angel Keys. This is a sort of resume of what I have written in the last page of my book, where there is also a sort of moral, if you want. The history of our dish of spaghetti, the search for its origins and roots, has forced us to travel to multiple lands and to meet eating habits, ways of production, and culinary procedures distant from each other in time and space. This little big history has shown us in the concreteness of a dish of spaghetti that identity does not correspond to roots. Our identity, our culinary identity, or every identity, is what we are or we eat. Our roots, our origins, the roots and origins or of what we eat and we are not what we were on the, or what we ate, but rather the encounters, exchanges, and crossings that have transformed what we were into what we are, what we ate into what we eat. So searching for the origins of what we are and eat may just be a way of getting to know others. Others who in some way live in us. This is the moral of my book. And this story, I hope will be continuing. And the little phrase I put here, movement is the cause of all life, by Leonardo da Vinci, seems to me to be a perfect expression to conclude my speech. Thank you for listening. I hope my English was comprehensible.
Fabulous, Massimo, fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm waiting for the Direttore to hear if we have some time for some comments, questions.
We definitely do have a couple of minutes, I think, because one thing that was very important for me was to have this new perspective, a new viewpoint on something that we absolutely take for granted, almost as an everyday act, you know, of cooking, even boiling spaghetti in water, you know, which is something that you would do, like you brush your teeth, or you know, tie or make a tie knot. So it was very interesting to find a history and the reasons for that too.
People are being a little shy, so we're waiting for some questions and comments. This is a very skinny little book, but it is very deep. And in fact, as the Direttore was saying, we probably are not going to look at that pot of boiling water the same way from now on, because in each step we understand, you know, the long history behind. And so Montanari's helped us to deconstruct not only the ingredients that go into this plate, but when certain marriages have happened across time between pasta and cheese, and the very late marriage with the tomato sauce, and the resistance and you know, that the tomato has encountered in Italy and Europe for a long time, till the, you know, the 19th century. But also methods, procedures, tools that are used, from spoon to fork, or using your own hands, and so absolutely fascinating. And so we're going to reflect on these ingredients and procedures and methods and steps, but also on what is this, you know, this dish that today is represented like this. I also wanted to point out that yesterday, Professor Gentilcore ended his lecture by reading to us the Artusi recipe, and especially the anecdote of Don Pomodoro. So we're finding even more connections with Artusi, with the history of tomato and the history of the tomato sauce. And we saw, thank you to Laila Tentoni, also the watercolor by Ragozzini, which is absolutely wonderful, so ironic, so fun to see the priest Don Pomodoro, where his face is the, you know, is basically a tomato. So let's see if we have some comments or questions.
I could read many interesting questions. I don't know how many minutes we have, but I would like to make a little answer to 3 of them. The first one was the question, what kind of pasta used the Romans that cooked pasta in the oven and not in water? So the Roman pasta is lagana, is large one, is la sfoglia. How do you say la sfoglia? The dough.
Sheet. The sheet.
The sheet.
Yeah.
This sfoglia was used either for being cooked as we do today with the lasagne on different strati,
Layers.
on different layers in the oven, or to be cut, to be broken and put inside a broth, inside a soup or something like that. Connected with this question, another one was on why so many shapes of pasta.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot explain this enormous fantasy, enormous creativeness of Italians. I read that in Italy something like 1,700 names for pasta have been censored. Why? The answer cannot be different dressings, because for centuries pasta was always dressed with cheese and butter or lard. So the difference of dressings cannot be an explication. I think that the difference of pasta can be explained in two ways. The first one of on the plan of imaginary, the wish to be different from the other, the search for an identity, then creating a shape that does not exist in the village behind. Something like this. Another explication can be perhaps, I think, more on this, found in the fact that the shape of pasta gives to the mouth a different taste, in effect. We always think of taste as something of chemical, the flavor, but eating, we have also a relationship with the concreteness of what we are eating, the texture, the shape. I always remember an experiment made by the famous Italian cook Gualtiero Marchesi to propose in the same dish 4 different shapes of pasta dressed in the same way, just to make the inventors to understand that a different shape makes a different taste. So shape is a substance in a way. On the contrary, Aristotle wrote that made a difference between forma e sostanza, shape and substance. Perhaps the history of pasta demonstrates that shape is substance. I don't remember the third one, but
there was a question about Marco Polo.
Ah, sì, Marco Polo. I did not talk about Marco Polo this morning because this is totally fake news. I have talked about it in a little chapter of my book.
Yes.
But Marco Polo that brings back pasta from China is an American invention of the 20th century that we find in a magazine of the industrial pasta makers of the United States. Because when Marco Polo went to China, already in Italy was known and was eaten, was consumed pasta. What we can say is that China is the other region in the world where a strong and important tradition of pasta has born during centuries, but different. I was telling before that the industry of pasta is a typical Italian invention because based on dried pasta, made for conserve, for preservation and for commercialization, while we don't know a Chinese pasta industry because Chinese pasta is made only fresh for being consumed as soon as possible. Anyway, what I said, this is the last thing, the last observation. Some scholars think that perhaps the two big pasta traditions of the world, China and Italy, we are comparing a very, very big country and a very, very little one, but the two cultures of pasta are they. Perhaps could be spread by the same place that is Persia, towards east and towards west. This is not proved, but is an hypothesis that has been made.
I think perhaps we'll stop here with the questions and the comments, but you know, we have Massimo Montanari has talked to us about encounters of ingredients of different populations. He took us to Sicily and to Naples and to Americas. And, you know, in these encounters, you know, this book made it here and we encounter you again, and we can't wait to have you back in the Midwest. And in the meantime, get this book. It's really cute. It's also really strong, beautiful hardcover. It starts with the quote from Totò, but it ends with philosophical reflections on roots and identity and meeting others and exchanges. And so thank you so much, Massimo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also
thank from
the Italian Cultural Institute and on behalf of the Consulate General of Italy, I would like to thank very much Professor Montanari for this enlightening lecture on the history of spaghetti, and would like to thank everyone who followed us today. So buona settimana della cucina a tutti, and see you all very soon. Thank you.
Grazie.
Arrivederci.
Grazie a lei.
Grazie.
Grazie, grazie.
Ciao, ciao a tutti.
Arrivederci. Ciao a tutti.
Arrivederci.